Welcome to an episode of Behind the Scenes, a weekly program unveiling the biggest political developments in Somali politics. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and producer here on HORUFADHI Media. On this week's program, the federal state of Puntland in the Somali Republic declares it will operate as an autonomous government independent of Mogadishu until the federal government drafts a constitution and holds a referendum, among other preconditions. What does this mean for President Hassan Sheikh's campaign pledges that include a slogan that translates roughly to "Somalis in agreement"? This is a topic on the program today. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media. Also, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media Group's second channel, known as HORUFADHI TV, where you are currently watching this program and where you can find other exclusive programs such as Bihahi Salah, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider HORUFADHI Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment. Let's get straight into it. In a major escalation of political tensions, Puntland state government released a press statement on Monday declaring itself autonomous from the federal government in Mogadishu. In the statement, Garowe stated it will conduct its affairs like an independent government. This major escalation only comes days after State President Saeed Abdullahi Deni launched a scathing attack against the federal government led by President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud regarding the situation in Las Anod after he refused to sign the National Consultative Council Summit agreement in Mogadishu only days earlier. Discussing the recent National Consultative Council Summit, Deni alleged that President Hassan Sheikh wanted the Somali governance system to return to a centralized one, as well as legalizing Sol and Senag regions to the autonomous Somaliland government in northern Somalia, two regions claimed by Puntland, but also self-identify as an unrecognized state of Khartoum. Then he explained that these were the reasons as to why he rejected the recent federalization deal signed by federal government leaders and federal member states. Indeed, this is not the first time that the Puntland state government has decided to press the nuclear button on relations with Mogadishu. Examples could be 2013 on the Farole, 2014 on the Abdulwali gas, and 2019, within months of taking office by Saeed Abdullahi Deni. Nevertheless, the reality now is that the state president Deni has had a political rift with President Hassan Sheikh since the appointment of Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre. Following the victory of Hassan Sheikh in May 2022, Deni perceived, since he played a significant role to ensure Mohamud's victory against Farmajo, he ought to have an influence on the role of Prime Minister. Indeed, Garowe wanted an individual from Puntland, with some rumors circulating that Deni wanted the role himself. Nevertheless, Hassan Sheikh chose a close ally, Hamza Abdi Barre, who originally hails from the western Somalia region but currently represents Jubaland in the Somali federal system. The rift would surface when Deni denied Prime Minister Barre a visit to Garowe. Nevertheless, attempts were made to rectify the rift when Mohamud appointed Farola's son and other key Puntland figures into different positions in Villa Somalia and other areas of government. Ultimately, relations would continue to deteriorate, with Deni refusing to attend an NCC summit, instead opting to join via a Zoom call, and his outright refusal to support the federal government and locals in neighbouring Galmudug state against Al-Shabaab wars. However, before we delve further into this political rift between the leadership in Garowe and Mogadishu, let's take a look at the press statement and assess what this could mean. Now, the Puntland state government has argued that the federal government continues to treat federal member states in a somewhat subordinate fashion, despite the important parts played by federal member states in building the nation from security to development. Now, Garowe highlighted the immense contribution to the state-building process in Somalia, from politically and financially supporting the transitional government to holding important conferences in Garowe and Galkayo. Ultimately, Puntland highlighted that there were still major hindrances to the state-building process in Somalia, including the liberation of the country from Al-Shabaab and a small ISIS group in Puntland, to reach a resolution on the Somaliland issue with particular weight on the federal government's talks with Somaliland and the state of Puntland's talks with the state of Somaliland, to reach a political settlement on the governance systems. Number 4, the status of Benadir should be defined by the government, adding that the administration of Hassan Sheikh Mohamud should immediately clarify the topical issue of revenue sharing, a settlement on its federal systems with aims to pave the way for power sharing model on the founded principles of federalism, and finally, the finalization of the provisional constitution of the Somali Republic, harmonization of federal member state and federal constitutions, and finally, and ultimately, to hold a referendum nationwide for the public to decide. Now, until these preconditions are met, Puntland state government has reiterated that it would evoke powers from Article 4 of the Puntland State Constitution and Article 142 of the Provisional Constitution of the Federal Government of Somalia to negotiate with Mogadishu on running affairs independently. So what are these articles and what do they mean? Now, Article 4 Paragraph 2 of the Puntland State Constitution states that Puntland has a legal right to negotiate its relationship with the federal government in regards to powers being ceded to Mogadishu. Similarly, in Article 142, Paragraph 1 of the Somali Provisional Constitution, it states that until the constitutions of the federal member states and the Somali Federal Constitution are harmonized, state parliaments shall retain and exercise powers endowed by their own state constitutions. In other words, state constitutions and powers will overrule Mogadishu and federal powers until the constitutions of the federal member states and the federal constitutions are harmonized. Nevertheless, Garowe does reiterate that it will participate in the state building process in Somalia, but it will give main priority to the development and progress of Puntland State. Among a string of measures, Garowe has ordered Puntland State ministers to not engage in any discussions with federal ministers aside from development projects and salaries. So many of you are probably wondering, why does the Provisional Constitution empower federal member states much more than the government in Mogadishu? Well, in 2012, the Somali nation ushered in its first internationally recognized federal government with the Provisional Constitution in place. It was anticipated that the Constitution would remain provisional for only a brief moment before a referendum would be held. However, a decade later, the Constitution remained incomplete. In other words, there has been no harmonization of laws in Somalia, meaning that each region and district has its own local laws, not governed or not originating from a single law of the nation. A constitution is a social contract between a citizen and a state, but it also highlights the federal powers between federal member states and the federal government and ensures all laws across the country originate from one legal text governed by a Supreme Court. Because the constitution has not been complete and there is no universally accepted legal framework in Somalia, the provisional constitution enables state governments to utilize state constitutions while negotiating with the federal government on a new constitution that could be universally accepted and put to a referendum. Now, since President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud took office in May, there has been increasing tensions between Villa Somalia and federal states of Puntland and Southwest State. Indeed, we have witnessed clashes in Southwest State with opposition politicians in Mogadishu pushing for chaos and Baydhabo supporting a militia group. Nevertheless, despite the confrontations, Southwest State continues to have a working relationship with Mogadishu, with President Hassan Sheikh visiting Baydhabo on Tuesday. Other federal member states perceived to have had a close relationship with the Farmaajo administration, including Hirshabelle under Ali Goodlawe and Galmudug under Ahmed Qorqor, also have had a working relationship with Mogadishu. Conversely, Puntland under Deni has continuously showed discontent through either skipping federal government functions or outrightly rejecting declarations involving federal member states and the federal government. So, can the Somali government even fulfill these preconditions set by Garowe? Interestingly, during the presidential elections between 2021 and 2022, Deni, alongside Jubaland strongman Ahmed Madobe, outright refused to support direct elections, arguing that Somalia was not ready to do so, and this led to the indirect election framework being agreed upon in 2020. Now, indeed, if Deni believed such is the case, how can he expect the federal government to hold a nationwide referendum on the current constitution only a year not even a year into President Hassan Sheikh's term? It was literally a year ago when Deni was arguing that Somalia can't hold a nationwide election, let alone a referendum on a constitution. You see, Somalia has major security concerns. There are political battles ongoing across the country, starting with the near-dead relationship now between Mogadishu and Hargeisa, the issue of Khartoum state, political tensions in Baydhabo, the issue of Gedo, as well as the ongoing war against Al-Shabaab across the country. Ultimately, it's difficult to see the federal government ticking all the boxes anytime soon. So, is the act by Deni really a political game of intentionally creating sabotage in Somalia's political leadership while distracting local attention away from the strengthening opposition he's facing in Garowe and Bosaso? Now that's an interesting question. You see, back in Garowe, Deni is facing rebellion with opposition leaders, accusing him of plotting to extend his term through a back door. To stamp his authority in state politics, Deni is said to be sponsoring disputed registration of voters, which has even targeted underage children ahead of municipal elections, according to some experts. The former chairman of the Transitional Puntland Electoral Commission, or TPEC, Guled Salah, accused Deni of expecting TPEC to rig the elections on his behalf. During a conference held by opposition parties and heavyweight political figures in Puntland, former Somali Foreign Minister Ahmed Isa also accused Deni government of being the first in Puntland to rig elections. He also condemned attempts by Deni to ring-fence elections for 3 parties only rather than open candidates. Ahmed Isa described it as undemocratic. As a result, opposition parties have vowed to boycott the voter registration process and looming elections. Some analysts have argued that the system being enforced is staged in a way that it benefits the ruling Kah party, headed by the incumbent state president Deni. Aside from the political opposition, an intention to sabotage the Mahmoud administration could also be a possibility. As mentioned before, Deni ran and lost the 2022 federal presidential elections. And as mentioned before, there was some sort of backdoor agreement between Mahmoud and Deni, which obviously Deni was not content with. So before the elections of Farmajo's elections, the presidential elections in 2021, we saw Puntland and Jubaland siding with the opposition, then led by Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud and Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, in a similar fashion. So we have now seen, again, Deni attempted to form relations with Laftagan, to form an alliance similar to the one with Jubaland against Farmajo. So it's clear that it's possible, and it's clear that Deni uses a particular formula to continue to hinder a federal government that he does not agree with, because it's clear that he's literally arm wrestling Villa Somalia into accepting his terms and conditions. Otherwise, he will act in the manner that he is. We've seen him do that with Farmajo when he done that alongside Ahmed Madobe and with opposition figures, and it seems to be doing a similar thing here right now. So what does this all mean for President Hassan Sheikh's plans to unite the Somali state? The reality is that Somalia is very far from being united. The issue of Las Anod has sparked a new dispute with Hargeisa, and Somaliland State President Musa Bihi accused Mogadishu and Garowe of inflaming Seoul. We know Khartoum State wants to be its own state, a member of the federal government of Somalia, which has not happened yet. We know Puntland has cut all relations with Mogadishu right now. Tensions are high in Southwest State. The double reconciliation summit was postponed. It was initially for January 5th and has been set back. And opposition groups continue to support chaos and militia groups in Bay Double. We see Garowe and Kismayo unable to reconcile as long as Madobe remains the state president of Jubaland. There's a lot of work to be done, and it seems as though Somalia has not progressed at all in terms of internal political stability since May 2022, with more political instability than before.